What a meal we just served here on Michigan Outdoors. Mort Neff, you had 10 exotic dishes.
Oh, they were marvelous. I tell you, they bring back memories of the old wild game cooking contests we used to have with George Perot. A lot of people remember that.
Oh, great contest. What a great show for 23 years, Michigan Outdoors with Mort Neff. And the pattern that I'm following is no secret. Those of you who watch Michigan Outdoors see the similarity, the pace, the variety, the hunting and fishing coverage, and also the way I open the show, Mort. Give me one more lesson.
One more lesson?
I need another lesson.
I can't give you a lesson.
Give me a lesson, Mort. I know you can.
Hi, folks. Come on in. 7:30. It's Thursday. It isn't 7:30. Thursday night and time for a close-up of Michigan Outdoors.
From the rugged shore and woodlands of the north, its history of copper mines and iron ore, the Great Lakes fisheries. To the farmlands of the southern counties, we'll look around again at all that waits the sportsman in the state of Michigan. And sometimes when the moon brings out the diamonds in the snow, and the stillness of the forest lies encased in Arctic cold, the wind might whisper through the trees, listen if you can, it tells you of the beauty in this state of Michigan.
Well, we just finished the wild game cooking contest with this recipe book, Fish and Wild Game Classics. All the recipes will be in that book. But of course, Mort, when we talk about wild game classics, who could top all the Michigan Outdoors cameramen over the years?
Oh, Howard Shelley. He was the numero uno, I'll tell you that. And when Howard came on the show, we turned him loose, and he always came up with a wildlife oddity that just couldn't be beaten. I remember so many of them, and so do you. In fact, you have one of them to feature tonight.
We have one to feature, which is very suitable for our wild game cooking contest. It's called The Deer Who Came to Dinner.
We had a call from this Mr. and Mrs. Farmer, as I shall call them, over near Vermontville, just 25 or 30 miles west of here. Come on over, Mr. Shelley. We have something of interest for you. So I drove over, arriving well before daylight that morning, and there as Mr. Farmer went to the barn to milk, feed the cattle, wandering around the barnyard was this last spring's fawn. Now, the deer was never tied up, never shut up, had free run of the countryside. It would follow the farmer around, and among all things that was strange, it made the perfect pet for their big boxer dog. Where you'd see one, invariably you would see the other. So I just made it my business that morning to try and have my camera at the right spot at the right time and see what would happen in the way of a story.
So, was this raised as a fawn?
It just came in wandering from the woods one day, and from then on just stayed around the farm buildings, but in the afternoon it would go back to the woods. Next morning it would return to the farmstead.
Amazing.
Now, Mr. Farmer goes to the granary, and when you see that young deer hop around like that, you know what's coming up. Mr. Farmer comes out with a half dozen ears of choice kernel corn, and how the deer does love that. And that actually leads us into the title of our film, The Deer That Comes to Dinner. Because after he has his chores done, the farmer goes to the house. When the deer looks through the window like that, you better get the back door open because he's ready to come to breakfast. And he comes moseying right into the house. And of course, the lady that supplies the food, he must go greet her first because he knows that within a matter of minutes, there'll be a choice food item for him. Now, you know, when our children come in the house, they have dirty shoes and dirty boots, but you never need worry about that in regards to our friendly deer. His feet are spick and span clean. Now, it's just about right. The bowl of dog food has been mixed, and there we see our two friends, friendly, never arguing. I want mine first. No, you can't have it. I'm going to have it next. No friendly. It's just good, plain, well, two pets together, eating and eating as you see them. And then as the next course, how about a slice of juicy apple, and how that deer does love it. You'll note a little mar on its right eye. In its younger days, it got caught in a barbed wire fence. Then it moves into the living room in front of the mirror because you see this young doe, there won't be too long till she's interested in a young buck, so she wants to see that she's looking just right. And then finally, back to the kitchen. Well, here you see the big boxer. He's tired out already. He lies down for a rest. Don't you hurt your buddy there with that sharp paw. Then the deer, too, will lie down momentarily, but only for 3, 4, 5 minutes. never going to sleep, always alert. And after it was there for less than 5 minutes, as one might suspect, it arises, and then when it goes over to the kitchen window and looks toward the outside, that is it. You better get the front door open. She's ready to go outside. And that's the story of how our deer came to dinner.
Howard, that is nothing short of incredible. Incredible. I mean, Marty Stover is a film producer that has a Wild America series, and he uses animals that are trained. But a deer like that would be amazing to train a deer that much.
There was no training whatsoever there. It's simply a case of that deer came in when it was a little spotted fawn, and no one harmed it, no one hurt it. It was given food, and literally it made its home right there.
There aren't too many deer that have a personality like that, though.
No,
Very few wildlife species. In fact, oftentimes they get kind of mean and nasty when it comes to the fall.
That's right.
Well, that's it. Of course, you've seen ruffed grouse do this.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Occasionally. Any other animal oddities that, in your years of photographing, that seem to tame down like that every now and then?
Well, you named the one. In fact, on the show one time, we had a gentleman from up from the Mount Pleasant area that had a grouse. Came in, and it'd hop up on his hand, finally up on his arm, onto his shoulder. And we called the old gentleman, had him on the show one night. Like myself, he was minus a lot of hair up there.
Hey,
and the grouse stood right there and pecked him so hard on top of the head that there were 3 or 4 blood spots there.
You mean he brought that grouse into the studio?
Right in the studio, right down to the studio.
And who knows why? Just so happens an unusual animal.
One of the freak things of Mother Nature.
Howard Shelley was tops, Mort, when it came to those wildlife films.
You know, they're just one of his gems. That really was. He's got a book full of them.
Oh, I know he does. Incredible stories. And you sent him around the state to root out all types of odd animals. What's the oddest that you've run into?
That I ran into? Well, one time a farmer, a woodcutter near Riverdale in Michigan, called me and he said, I have a grouse that follows me out into the woodlot every morning. And he says, you ought to come up and meet this grouse. So I went up there and we got on a tractor. And as soon as we got to the woods, the grouse was right behind the tractor running along. And I thought that's a pretty good story. We got to the woodlot, and I had to hide behind a pile of wood because the grouse was a little spooky toward me, but very friendly toward this woodcutter. And came time for a lunch break, and the grouse sat on his shoulder and shared a sandwich with him. Remarkable. Huh. And that went on all day to show the affinity between this man and this grouse. And finally, I said, well, I've got enough footage here for a good little story. And then I left. And about 2 weeks later, I called as a follow-up and said, hey, how's that grouse coming along? And he tearfully said, oh, Mort, he said, a terrible thing has happened. He said, I was out in the woodlot, and I didn't look what was going on where that bird was, and I cut down a tree, it fell on him, and killed him.
No.
And he said, I was in tears, but he said, I have a cousin over in Grand Rapids who was a taxidermist, and I sent the bird to him right away, and he gave me a beautiful mount on that partridge, and he said the pat came back to my house looking just like it did when it was running around the woodlot, and he said, I took my wife's picture off the mantle and put the grouse there. And I want to tell you, it nearly broke up his home. But his wife now tells me that grouse has gone to this man has passed on, and now his brother has it in Denver. The same grouse.
A grouse took it with a tree.
That's
you would
right.
think the way grouse are so flighty, they get out of the way.
Oh,
Well, I tell you, Mort, we got to get out of the way right now. We have pledge breaks coming up around the state. Call into your local PBS station. We'll be back with more Mort Neff in just a moment. Here we are on our pledge special. We're just completing what is actually 2 hours of live broadcasting, Mort. This is a long haul, isn't it?
It's a long haul, but it's worth it. I tell you, I take great pleasure in seeing these pledge programs come out on PBS up where I am, up in Harbor Springs on Channel 9, and they are doing a great job up there. Talk about loyal listeners. You really got them. You break all records.
You started them. You got them not just warmed up, you got them hot. So I hope I'm carrying on the Mort Neff tradition.
We have a real champion in our governor for hunters and the fishermen and all the sportsmen in the state. He has an eye for what's good for us.
Thank God.
I didn't think it was going to turn out that way, but Bob has surprised me in the headlines we've been able to pull out after the last election, because we lost a lot of good friends in the House and Senate.
We sure did, and I was surprised too, but we've got a lot of good friends left. Some of them you see every week or so on Michigan Outdoors. Fred, we get some mail too.
Oh, do we get mail?
Yeah,
Mort and I used to share opening the letters.
I wish he could come down and help right now.
Yeah.
This one from Bob Kuntz of Auburn Hills, Michigan. He writes, he says, while turkey hunting last year, we found a number of eggs, which I believe are turkey eggs. They were scattered around by a predator. Some were broken and some were whole, but were within a 50 to 75-yard area. Do you think they were moved while the hen was off her nest, or was it too cold for a hatching period? We could not find anything around that looked like a nesting site.
Evidently, Bob thought when he saw these eggs scattered around that maybe the hen turkey would defend that nest and fend off predators.
I think she might have been out for an afternoon stroll, which is typical during the nesting season. It certainly wouldn't have been the cold weather, and a raccoon or maybe even a skunk got into
Or
it.
a crow. And I'll tell you, I can remember filming a hen turkey sitting on a nest for 45 days, not knowing that they were not fertile eggs. She just stayed there.
They're very devoted.
Yes.
Certainly.
Very sharp, and they're sharp in their senses, but not too sharp upstairs, turkeys.
Okay.
Now we have another letter here,
Next
Bob.
letter, too, from Frank Ruskowitz of Marine City. He writes, and he says, in regard to the question in the January-February digest on muddy tasting fish, I found 3 things to improve the taste from fish of this nature. 1, fillet and skin. 2, remove any red or dark area along the lateral line. 3, soak in cold, lightly salted water overnight in the refrigerator. This should remove most of the off taste. Sometimes fish will pick up a muddy flavor from lying on a stringer too long. It's a good idea to ice or clean your fish as soon as possible.
From Frank who?
Frank Ruskowitz of Marine City, Michigan.
Good job on his name, Bob. We got a lot of those long names with the C's and the Z's. What do you think, Mort? You've tasted fish from lakes all over North and South America, probably a few in Europe, and there are some lakes where the fish taste a little strong.
That's right. That's right. That, of course, has to do with the food they ate and the habitat. But the best fish I ever tasted in Michigan, of course, I think everybody will agree, is the walleye pike. There's nothing to beat that. As far as saltwater is concerned, the Arctic char, that is a champion. Oh, golly, I wish we could raise those here in the state.
Had some of those in Iceland.
Yeah.
This past year. That was super. How about this? Our live PBS special with another special guest. If it isn't Ed Grove.
Happy birthday, Fred.
Ed, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You've been out studying television and
Well,
getting a master's degree?
Yeah, some of that. As a matter of fact, I graduate this Saturday.
I'll be doggone.
Yep, I put on the gown and the whole bit.
You were in on the birthing pains of this
You bet.
program.
That's
And
right.
we had plenty of birthing pains.
That's a good way to put it.
I'll tell you.
Great.
Yeah, well, Mort knows. I tell you, I've talked to you, Ed, a lot about Mort Neff and what he said in the pace and
That's right.
variety, and
We followed it, and we found that it worked.
it works
right.
absolutely.
Thank you. I'm flattered.
You weren't in on this trip, Eddie, that we did last summer, but let's take a look at some tape when we took Mort Neff out with Pete Rubianis, and you know the fishing action we've had with Pete.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we had some action right here. How many fish you suppose we had hooked at once?
6.
5. You overguessed
Okay,
it, Ed.
all
Doggone. You knew Pete was good, but you see, we didn't have enough rods there. There's still 1 or 2 rods set, but there's Mort cranking in well, it's probably about a 10 or 12 pound Chinook.
There were 4 rods across the stern and 2 outriggers on the side, and 5 of them hooked fish at the same time. And by golly, we caught 4 of those fish without any crossed lines or any foul-ups. It was a remarkable day. You know, Fred, we ought to talk about the coming season for salmon, because it won't be long right after ice is out that southern part of Lake Michigan comes to life.
Oh, it comes to life.
Those little cohos are delicious eating.
They've caught a few through the ice in Saginaw Bay.
Have they up there?
Catfishing for perch.
Say, that's going to be something. But the ice, of course, will go out earlier in the southern part of Lake Michigan. And slow trolling in 4 or 5 feet of water down there is
Right.
a highly productive sport.
Right next to
I'll be
shore.
down there around off Michigan City. And around there, you can catch fish on small spinners with very light spinning tackle. Get a lot of action out of these little 1.5 2 pound cohos. And you talk about eating.
Oh, I know it.
They are just great.
But, you know, there's nothing that compares to the type of action you get on a salmon boat when you have 5 fish on at once and they're all in the 5 to 20 pound
And
category.
Pete Rubianis yelling at the top of his lungs, I'll bet, the whole time.
Hook it, move it, switch the lines. I tell you, that was excitement.
Yeah.
There's another fish aboard. We just took them in one after another. Bob Garner manning the pliers. And the salmon fishing just seems to get better and better, I think, because the fishermen get better and better.
And the gear gets better and better.
The gear gets better?
Don't forget that. It's getting highly electronic now, too, with the fish finders and all of the downriggers that are so beautifully engineered. It really is something.
And there you are, Mort. You still have one on, I think, there. Yep.
Yeah,
Probably
a rubber boot.
Yeah.
I doubt it.
I doubt it. Well, I tell you, what do you think, Mort? You just completed 2 hours here with us live.
I've enjoyed every minute of it. I think you're doing a great job, and I'm cheering for you, and I hope that all of our friends out there in PBS land are going to pledge plenty to keep Michigan Outdoors on the air.
Well, they have been. They certainly love the tradition that you started, and I am glad to say are a part of on this special evening. Hey, this was the greatest night I've had in my 5 years of Michigan Outdoors, Mort, due to you.
I'm very gratified. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, folks.
Thank you.